last week? Who missed it? Who were here? Okay, Paul missed it. Were you here, Pauline?
No.
No. So you've got to catch up on this, yeah. I'll go over a little bit of it, but you can catch up with a friend or something. Yes, I'm not sure when to tell you when to go. Hold on.
You just carry on. And then
I'll carry on. So you would have all made one of these, which was a straightforward waistband. Ta-da! You've got them with you. Super. Because I would like to see you sew this today, so we're going to get on the sewing machines. But what I didn't do last week was talk about if you've got, for instance, let's get rid of this. If you've got a high-waisted, you saw this on the stand, it's a high-waisted, it goes into a trouser. Because what we're looking at is how to finish off something. Oh, it feels like getting married again. Which won't happen. But, we were looking at how to finish off these top edges, raw edges, and one way was a waistband, and another way is dropping a facing in, just like you did on your little sample of your half scale. And you went off and you looked at waistbands out in the shops to see how many different ones you could find, which was a little disappointing because they were all elastic, weren't they? Most of them. That was disappointing. Anyway, so if you wanted to finish off a high-waisted a trouser that comes above the natural waist, we would drop a facing in. So I'd like you to do a pattern for that this morning, and if you've got time, to also get on the machines and sew that sample as well. So, let me show you how to make a pattern for the facing one. We've done the straightforward waistband. Anybody got any questions on things they might not have understood from that? Nothing's too silly. That was straightforward. So we measured, so I'm going to ask you to, later in a moment, copy off this onto calico. This is a block, remember, so there's no seam allowances on the block.
This is the same one.
It's the same one that you copied, yes. So you've got those seams on there, Sophia, have you? So when you're going to sew it, you're going to have to add seams. I don't necessarily need you to make a pattern, because what I'm very much in favour of, and I had some calico, this is hard work. It is hard work because it needs.
No, not for you.
I think demos need to be done without the students really, and just done almost speechless.
Almost speechless, that's it.
Because this is very interactive.
Damn good reproduction.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Good.
But I think I may leave it now.
Yes.
Because I'm getting a pale
Okay, Janet. Okay, it's cool to know it's a good production on there.
Yes, maybe we can do something about this.
It'd be really easy then. And can you get what's on there off onto Brillo?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, little short. It's good, isn't it?
It's very clear.
I can't believe how clear that is. That's just amazing. I don't know what sound qualities are. That's interesting, isn't it? So, I can continue.
No need to. I think. Anyway, you have fun. You do whatever you need to do. You can make a pattern of this if you like to, but the exercise is to get the waistband onto the waist. So what I do is I normally place the block straight down onto the calico, and you'll do quite a lot of this with me, because it cuts out a whole process where you make a pattern, and then you make that up into a toile. This is what you'll do later. And then the toile still isn't right, because you're still at the working stage, and so you end up changing the toile on the stand, which means you then have to go back and change the pattern that you've already made. Well, why start with a pattern that you don't know is right or not in the first place? So I work straight onto the calico, and it cuts out that process. And I'm sort of jumping ahead really for you all, and I don't want to confuse you, but that will all become clear as we go along. So you see what I've done? I go straight onto the calico, and then I add my seam allowance afterwards. So you'll end up today with a front, in calico, facing it on grain, and the back in calico, and we're going to sew those side seams together. And then because we're just making half a garment for your sample books, you just need to cut out half your waistband, obviously not all the way around the body. So I've drawn a nice centre front line, so I know where my centre front is. I've then copied it off here on the tab. Just copied it off onto the calico. Already got seams on this, so no need to add any more seams. And then I want you to attach the waistband onto the little half skirt. Now there's a way of doing that.
I'm missing the hang of this. I could go into film production, I think. I'm stopping and starting and everything briefly.
The first thing, because we made a little tab last week, because we were imagining that we would have a button at the back of our skirt. That's not always the case, okay? There's always exceptions to these things. So the first thing you would want to do is turn that little tab through. Do you know what I mean when I say that? It means you sew it together, right sides of the fabric together, and you would stitch that tab corner, trim off any excess at the corners because otherwise it's very bulky, and then literally turn it through. So I can't show you because I haven't sewn it, but you literally turn it through. It was like what you did.
Is it like bagging out?
It's like bagging out. Bag out, turn through, yeah, same thing. And you'd have done it when you made your little sample with the neck facing. You'd have sewn it on, turned it through, or bag out, yeah, same thing. What I want to show you is, there's my shoes, notches. When you notch, yeah, I've got notches. You need those notches. Why do you need those notches in your waistband?
So you can match it
So
to match it.
You match the seams to put it together.
yeah, it's matching something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in this case, it's matched. Those notches will have been made so they line up with your centre lines and your side seam. So it keeps you on track basically when you're sewing.
Okay.
So when you notch in the fabric, you could just leave it as pencil because it's a toile, but if you're working for real, you would just little snip in. Please don't go as far as the seam allowance because that is very dangerous. When you stitch up your seam, you'll have this big snip and it's a weak point, and you could even snip beyond the seam allowance. So all it is a little, keep it flat on the table, little snip, probably about half the seam allowance. It's just for you. It's for you to know where that lines up. So when you put your waistband on, right, you've sewn the side seam together, you've turned out your little tab which sits at the back, and there's two ways of working. You can either sew the waistband on from the inside and you bring it over onto the right side, or you can sew it from the outside of the garment and take it over and onto the inside. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer, on the whole, working from the inside and turning it onto the outside, because when you do that, that's the inside of the garment, yeah? So I've seamed it here, so that's clean. I've then turned the waistband over onto the right side, and I can do a nice little neat edge stitch all the way along from the right side of the garment, because that's the side that's going to show, so you want that neat. Now if I happen to miss on this side, it doesn't really matter because it's on the wrong side and it's all neatly seamed anyway. The only problem comes with working that way is if you don't want an edge stitch, because you're doing a classic trouser or something that has no top stitching showing, because it's more classic. And then I would work the other way, but and I would hand finish it inside, so there's no stitching showing there. Some people, and a student made this, and I don't know who it was, and she's made it very nicely, so this isn't a criticism at all. Sometimes it can just be overlocked on the inside, yeah, and then you can do what's called stitch in the ditch, which means you keep your needle going on the inside that seam so you don't see it, and it holds this down. Nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, a lot of production will be made like that probably. But I personally have a hate for overlocking, you see. not a hate, but it's just a £20 more expensive garment in the shops if you don't have the overlocking showing. So I always like to turn in raw edges where I can. But this is not wrong, it's just a different way of working, and it's entirely up to you, you know, what fabrics you're working in sometimes, because they're very thick fabrics, or strange fabrics these days. You might prefer to overlock it. So just, I hope some of you have got some good sewing books. It sounds terribly old-fashioned to say, have you got a sewing book? But no, you need a sewing book, which has got techniques in. And have you got your lovely one on you, Zora?
I think I have.
Yeah, it's called the... If you've got that would be super. I'll show people. Is it coming up? Oh, cool. Okay, this one's lovely. Amazon. Amazon. For those that may have won anything recently, like Amazon vouchers. It's a nice little book, it really is. I bought it for a friend before. And it's got lovely clear diagrams. It's all you need. It's nice size. Pop it in your bag or keep it in your locker. And it will just do. It will just really say whatever I say here. Are you okay?
Yeah, I was just saying there was one like that in Smith.
Oh, was there?
Yeah.
Wonder how much it was.
I'll switch this off for a second, because we're promoting somebody else's book. You need your own book, darling.
And likewise with a good pattern cutting book. So what I think the best way of working is, because you don't have me for very, very long, you only have me for like 2 half days a week, I can show you something and you think, oh, and you might be a little bit confused. Then go home and look it up in the book. And then you'll read it in the book and think, oh, that's what Kathy meant. You know, I might not have said it very clearly. Or vice versa, you might be looking at something in the books and then I'll come to demonstrate it, and then it'll also make more sense. Or if there's something in the books and you want to just come and talk to me, you know, and we'll go through it individually, that's great. So good sewing book, good pattern cutting book, and we'll have a good collection in 2 years' time. So I'll leave that for now. You're going to make that later. I'll give you some calico for that. You needn't use demonstrations, I'll give you bits of calico. Okie dokie. So you should have your pattern, and you'll have those 3 pieces of calico to sit under the machine on. I'll leave these around. But what I want to show you just before I disappear is how to make a facing for something that might be a little bit more complicated like that. So I've got darts in the back, and I've got pleats in the front of this trouser. Yeah? Can you see that? There's my darts. And this is how I mark up the pleat. So I've put an arrow showing that that notch goes to that notch. I can't fold it because it's in cardboard, but if you copy it off on paper, you'll be able to fold this. And that the pleat gets stitched down. So I've given an indication with a hole there. So it will look like this. It will look like that, won't it? So these will be the pleats going down my leg, and these are the darts going over my bum. So how do we make a facing for that? Are you ready for this? You'll end up with a back facing that looks like that, no darts in it. You don't need darts in the facing, you can take them out. And you'll end up with a front facing looking like that. No pleats in the front facing, we've taken them out. Pardon?
The facing.
What about it?
That one?
2 of these. Yes, 2 of these. Cut 1 pair, I've put on there. I get into the habit of writing cut 1 pair, because if you put cut 2, you could cut 2, 1, 2. I've just cut myself the same size, haven't I? Actually, what I do want is 1, 2, isn't it? I want a pair. I want a left and a right, not 2 rights, not 2 lefts. It's just a habit. So if you start a habit now, you'll do it without thinking. Did you